Good afternoon, my fellow students. My name is Professor Dmitry Starchik, and we are having the last lecture in human anatomy today. I'm a little bit sorry because I had a scientific event and I couldn't start at the scheduled time, so I had to change the schedule, and we have our lecture now. I hope you hear me well and clearly. So if so, we are ready to start. Just I need just your positive feedback about today's translation. Yesterday was not very fast translation, and I'm afraid it is repeated now. Just please, I'm still waiting your response. Send me. Thank you, Lola. And we switch on. We switch to the lecture. Today we will talk about autonomic nervous system. That is the part of the nervous system which deal with the internal organ, blood vessels and glands. So let me start with some explanation. This picture shows the student reaction, motion during exam. Sometimes it happened with us, with you, and I just like to ask you, imagine a situation that will happen very soon in your life, I hope. It's the end of the semester and you've been studying anatomy diligently, and now it's time to take the exam. When you wait your turn to enter to the exam room and listen to other students worrying at the last minute about the details they think will be important to know for exam, that is typical situation, and suddenly you may feel tense as your heart will beat with excitement as in a moment of danger. You will also notice that your mouth cavity is dry, and you feel a rush of cold sweat on your back. Sometimes you feel your breathing will become faster and deeper. As you wait until you receive your examination card or ticket, these symptoms become more pronounced. Finally, the ticket is in your hands and you sit down at the table for preparation. As you review the ticket questions you realize that you can answer, and all question, you know all question with confidence, or you can't answer any. It happens also sometimes. In any case, when certainly appears, you will experience relief as this go. It is the start and it is the end of those emotions. But sometimes if there is no knowledge in your heart, in your head, then this nervousness will stay with you. It depends on the knowledge you have. In any of these variants, most of the effects we just saw describing as a result of work of the autonomic nervous system. And another idea I'd like to share with you, that see of this pyramid, and it is visible that our conscious thoughts, plans and actions are only a teeny fraction, only this fraction of the activities of our nervous system. Well, when all consciousness is eliminated, such as when we sleep, vital homeostatic process continue virtually unchanged. Longer, deeper states of unconscious are not more dangerous as long as nourishment is provided. And people who suffered severe brain injuries have survived in a coma for decades. Survival is possible under such conditions because the autonomic nervous systems makes routine adjustments in physiological system. Autonomic nervous system regulates body temperature and coordinate cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, excretory, and reproductive function. So the part of unconscious processes is bigger than conscious processes. It means we even didn't imagine that in our body such a work of the autonomic nervous system is being all the time when we sleep, when we walk, when we keep our feet in gym, etc. This lecture will examine the anatomical structure and subdivisions of the autonomic nervous system, and each subdivision has a characteristic anatomical and functional organization. First, we described parasympathetic division, and then we take a look on the sympathetic. There are two parts of autonomic nervous system called parasympathetic division and sympathetic division. Okay, so let's start, and I'd like to start to announce you or tell you about functions of the autonomic nervous systems. As you see, autonomic nervous systems, this will be abbreviated. The short name ANS. It means autonomic nervous system. This system can be defined as a motor nervous system that control glands, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. So, smooth muscles, glands, and cardiac muscle is the object of innervation of autonomic nervous systems. So, the primary target organs of autonomic nervous system are the viscera of the thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities, such as the heart, lungs, digestive and urinary tracts, and some structures of the body wall, such as the cutaneous blood vessels, the skin vessels, sweat glands in skin, and piloerector muscles. They are also located in skin. The somatic and visceral motor system are often described as voluntary and involuntary, respectively. So we call autonomic nervous systems involuntary systems, involuntary part of the nervous systems. These autonomic systems coordinates and regulates different processes in our body. It regulates body temperature, coordinates the cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, etc. functions. At the same time, it carries out the exchange of nutrition, regulate tissue respiration, and maintain the constancy of internal environment or homeostasis. We call this homeostasis. Another notice, please notice that in order to understand the functions of the body, the mode of actions of many drugs, because you will need to write perception and recommend some drugs for your patients in the future, I hope. So different aspects of healthcare, their knowledge about autonomic nervous system will be very necessary for you in the future. Let me illustrate you and show a couple of diseases associated with disorders of the autonomic nervous system. The first one we call achlasia cardia. This is a defect or disorganization in an autonomic innervation of the esophagus. As you see here, this is esophagus, and some dysregulation in the end part of esophagus, we call the distal part of the esophagus. And patients, such people, they can't can't swallow the food, and they can't pass the food into the stomach, and as a result we see huge dilatation, huge esophagus dilatation near to the stomach, and you see also the inability to swallow food. This achlasia cardia happens commonly in young people, and nobody still know the reason of this disease. Next interesting disease we call Raynaud disease or Raynaud phenomenon. This is a French doctor who was first who described these symptoms, and this disease is the result of dysregulation, dysregulation of sympathetic nervous systems in the fingers and toes. Usually it take response to the cold temperature, or sometimes it happens when people feel stressed. As a provisional disease, the cause is unknown. The case, why this disease extends, why the people survive from the syndrome, Raynaud syndrome. We just know that smoking, drinking coffee, some drugs cause vasoconstriction, but it looks very dramatic. Sometimes the finger are white, sometimes it is red and violent. So I'm afraid I think I wouldn't like to get such problems with my health. Okay, and now I'd like to explain differences between the autonomic nervous systems and somatic nervous systems we studied before. And this table will help you to understand the difference. When we compare the somatic and autonomic nervous systems, we see that effectors of autonomic nervous systems are glands, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. But only one effectors for somatic nervous systems are skeletal muscles. As a function, autonomic nervous systems regulate nutrition, blood and lymph circulation, excretion of metabolic products, and telling you reproduction as well. But the main function of somatic nervous system is locomotion and reaction to the some events in environment. So we should say that somatic nervous system, this is a system to get interaction with the environment. Mediator, as you see, noradrenaline, norepinephrine, another, this is synonym of noradrenaline, is in the synapses between autonomic nervous systems fibers and effectors. Sometimes we find acetylcholine. This is another mediator which is more typical for somatic nervous system, but sometimes we find acetylcholine in the ganglion of autonomic nervous systems. As you see, the autonomic nervous system is ancient, that is older than somatic. And another feature is that we can't control our autonomic nervous system mostly. And we can do that for our somatic nervous system. We can move with our hands, upper arm, head, and every part of our body where muscles are located, we can control voluntarily, but we can't control our heart rates, our blood pressure. But sometimes it is possible. I'd like to show you the technique named biofeedback, and this technique help people to work out control of blood pressure, of the stress, migraine, headaches, etc. When the people can see this level of, for example, blood pressure, and control and try to react and to decrease high blood pressure. And this technique with the mental and auto training help people to be more healthy. Take it in your consideration, and maybe sometimes you will recommend your patient just to study controlling of their autonomic nervous system. If we compare somatic and autonomous reflex arch, I guess you probably understand what does it mean. This is a spinal cord and two reflex arch with autonomic nervous systems, and in the right half you see the simple somatic reflex arch. Most autonomic responses can be consciously, as I said, and both autonomic nervous systems and somatic nervous system works through reflexes, and the morphological basis of the reflex, as you studied in the primary school, is the reflex arch, and you see two reflex arch. Autonomic nervous systems innervates visceral effectors, with the somatic nervous system who lower motor neurons innervated skeletal muscles. Here you see that the first neuron of both reflex arches located in spinal ganglia, sensitive spinal ganglia here. So it is the same place, and I can say that the first part of the reflex arches in somatic and autonomic systems are similar, but the main difference in autonomic and somatic systems is the arrangement of efferent neurons. As you see here, the efferent neurons for somatic system located in anterior cornu of spinal cord, and its axon reach the skeletal muscles with no interruption. But in autonomic systems, the first it has two efferent neurons. The first one located in the glycia substance of spinal cord, and its axon reach to the autonomic ganglion, which is located out of from some distance from the spinal cord, and this is the main difference. And then from the second neuron located in autonomic ganglion starts postganglionaric fiber that reach the organs, glands, smooth muscle cells, and cardiac muscle cells. This is a big difference. Another difference is visible in this picture, this figure, and you see as somatic nervous systems, an upper motor neuron here and here are located in cortex of brain, and axon of the lower motor neurons. So we have two motor neurons, upper motor neurons and lower or somatic nuclei of spinal cord, located in the spinal cord, in anterior corner. And here the peripheral process of neurons reach the skeletal muscles. Here you see that axon of a preganglionaric neuron, red one, control ganglionic neurons in the periphery. Stimulation of the ganglionic neurons may excite or sometimes inhibit the visceral effector innervated. So we have one nerve fiber from central nervous system to effector. In somatic nervous system only one, but we find two nerve fibers from central nervous system to effector, and we could find also synapse and ganglion, and two fibers, preganglionaric fibers or branches and postganglionaric fibers or branches. And the last difference in the autonomic nervous systems is in the location of their centers. As you probably remember, the principle of the somatic nervous system is the segmental principle. So we have different segments in the spinal cord. This is a small part of spinal cord, and its small part control the small part, small segment of the body. Such principle we call segmental type of innervation, segmental innervation. But in autonomic nervous systems, there are no segments. There we just see only some centers, center of parasympathetic nervous system, autonomic nervous system. They are green here, and red centers, red segment in central, red nuclei in the central nervous systems, and all of these centers are located focal. So it's a focal type of center location in autonomic nervous systems. This is also a big difference between those parts of nervous systems in our body. Then I have to explain you sympathetic and parasympathetic subdivisions of the autonomic nervous systems and their main differences. Take a look on this figure, this picture, this slide, and we see that there are two divisions in the autonomic nervous system. First one we call sympathetic division, and the second one is the parasympathetic division. Most organs have dual innervation, and most organs receive impulses. You see this connection from sympathetic and from parasympathetic nervous divisions, and in some organs nerve impulses from one division stimulate the organ to increase its activity, and impulses from other divisions decrease organ's activity. So one systems often stimulate or make excisions in organs, but in other systems make inhibition in organs. For example, an increased rate of nerve impulses from the sympathetic divisions increases heart rate. An increased rate of nerve impulses from the parasympathetic division decreases heart rate. So parasympathetic, if we are talking about our heart, so sympathetic stimulate, parasympathetic decreased heart rate. And this contrafunction of different divisions we can see very often in our body. A couple words about history studying autonomic nervous systems. The term sympathetic nervous systems appeared in the 18th century, long time ago, more than 200 years. And it meant the combined interaction of organs. This scientist, Walter Bradford Cannon, who worked in Harvard Medical School, and he was American physiologist, coined such expressions as homeostasis. He is a very famous scientist, and he proposed the term fight or flight reaction. He dedicated his career to the study of autonomic nervous systems. Walter Cannon found that an animal can live without a functional sympathetic nervous systems, one of the divisions of autonomic nervous system, but it must be kept warm and free of stress, and because it is not possible all the time. And he proved that sympathetic and autonomic nervous system cannot regulate can regulate the body temperature, tolerate and strenuous exertion, or even survive when it's necessary. So it is very important system in our body. Another Harvard professor, Herbert Benson, studied parasympathetic division of autonomic nervous systems. The name parasympathetic came later and meant that it was these systems is located near the sympathetic nervous system. It is para because it is located close to the sympathetic nervous system. That is history of studying, but next slide shows the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Let's take a look. So, as you see, sympathetic nervous systems innervate internal organs, glands, blood vessels, and skin, but parasympathetic innervates only internal organ and glands. So it is visible that because of blood vessels are almost everywhere in our body, so these systems is have more effectors than parasympathetic. Actually, parasympathetic components, parasympathetic activity we we don't see in skin, because no parasympathetic nerves come to the skin blood vessels, as well as to the sweat glands in skin. Then, as you probably guess, the sympathetic nervous systems is older than parasympathetic. It is new. Center of sympathetic nervous system is localized in the spinal cord from 8th cervical to 3rd lumbar segment. But center of parasympathetic nervous system located in brainstem and in only 2 sacral segments of spinal cord. The mediators are also different. Noradrenaline and acetylcholine for noradrenaline for sympathetic and acetylcholine for parasympathetic. Very interesting description and the name of function or reaction of sympathetic nervous system is proposed by Walter Bradford, canon expression fight or flight. But typical reaction for parasympathetic nervous system, reaction in the whole body effects, is rest and digest. And as you see, the effect of activation of sympathetic nervous system is catabolism, but for parasympathetic is anabolism. I'd like to demonstrate you these reactions, both for sympathetic and parasympathetic, and you see that reaction in activation of sympathetic system is fight or flight. Just imagine the cat. Imagine a cat which is seeing dogs, and you probably saw such situation very often, maybe not very often, but sometimes. And the typical reaction of the cat is the activation of sympathetic system. The animal prepare this activation of the sympathetic systems prepares the body for fight or for running, to escape from the place where dog is. As you see, all of these symptoms, the reaction described below for sympathetic activation: increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, etc. But activation of parasympathetic systems, I like it more because the reaction is under the expression rest and digest. It doesn't mean that I like to eat, but I like to rest. I hope you too. And symptoms and reaction are described here. This is decreased heart rate, lower blood pressure, and decreased production of cortisol. This is a hormone of stress, and usually it continue with the increased secretion of glands in gastrointestinal tract. Regarding the psychological conditions, activation of sympathetic system forms stress. It helps to keep external focus, because animals very often fight each other, and it stimulates physical activity, but it is resistant to learning. So when you have stress, you study anatomy worse than when you have no stress. Interesting that activation of parasympathetic systems, usually people and animals concentrate of their internal focus. They relieve stress, expanding attention, and they usually people have more learning ability during activation of parasympathetic systems. All of these features are in this slide. Here you see difference in mediators of somatic, autonomic nervous system, and difference between the two divisions of autonomic system. First scheme or picture illustrates the somatic nervous system, only one axon, and between the effector, it is skeletal muscles, and nerve fiber, located synapses, and these synapses have acetylcholine inside. For autonomic sympathetic nervous systems, we find two neurons, two effector neurons. One is in the spinal cord, second is in ganglion, autonomic ganglion, but here the synapse is under control of acetylcholine 2. It is also acetylcholine sensitive receptors in those synapses. But when we are talking about synapses between organs, between real effectors and nerve fibers, we find there norephedrine or noradrenaline. This is the name. It produces this mediator produced in adrenal glands. So we could also find that adrenal glands have acetylcholine receptors as the autonomic ganglion. But parasympathetic ganglions, they both synapses in ganglion and in the effectors in organs have acetylcholine as a mediator. That is the difference between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. This is another picture show it for you, that acetylcholine in parasympathetic divisions, but muscarine receptor acetylcholine for sweet glands, and only norephedrine or noradrenaline, norepinephrine, the right term, norepinephrine. This is the mediator for sympathetic divisions, of autonomic nervous system. You may ask me why we discuss these mediators now. I could explain that the difference, as you see in previous, this is a lot of drugs can act as a mediators, and sometimes they act as a stimulate the receptors, and we call them mimetics. They stimulate receptor. But another kind of drugs just block receptors, and we call them lytics. And we can influence of the process activity of different organ using mimetics and lytics. Let's see that in the eye, in our eye. For example, we have atropine. I actually don't know the correct pronunciation. We call that in Latin atropine. And this drug is lytic for receptors, for parasympathetic receptors. It blocks the acetylcholine receptors. So if we drop the some atropine solution in our eyes, almost immediately, we get dilated pupil, because the muscle that works as a sphincter of the pupil, it innervated by parasympathetic nervous system, and we blocked it, but still work the muscles innervated by sympathetic nervous systems, and these muscles called dilatator of pupil. So its tonus is good, because it has no sensitivity to atropine, because this is another type of receptors, noradrenaline receptors, and then the tone of muscles, which is dilatate pupil, is normal, and we see as a result dilated pupil when we put atropine drop atropine in our eyes. Here the list of effects when sympathetic or parasympathetic systems are activated. And first organ is the pupil. It is not organ, it is just hole. And sympathetic nervous system make it extended, but parasympathetic make it constricted. And other, heart rate increasing in sympathetic and decreasing in parasympathetic. Blood vessels, constriction in sympathetic when sympathetic systems is activated, and no effects when parasympathetic nervous systems get excited stage. You see here sympathetic vasomotor tone when the sympathetic nervous system is activated. The diameter of the blood vessels get constriction, and when is low rate of nerve firing, the vessels get no signals, and the blood vessels is in vasodilatation stage. Here you see another organs and their reaction in activation, both sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. And except of classification autonomic nervous systems into two divisions, we also distinguish central department of the autonomic nervous systems. This is centers in the brain, usually limbic systems and hypothalamic region, hypothalamic part of the brain. This is a visceral, we call it visceral brain of our body, and some nuclei in the brain and in the spinal cord. The second department is a peripheral department. Usually it is nervous structure are located in the peripheral subjects of nervous system, ganglia, and sometimes that is just nerve fibers and some plexuses we find everywhere in our body. Here different part. The central part, we call it also integrative centers, and peripheral part, they are located in the, or segmental centers in the spinal cord. Now it's time to study parasympathetic divisions of autonomic nervous systems. Here the picture with resting woman, she feels good, she relaxes, and this is the response of the parasympathetic divisions, because the response is rest and digest. As you see, preganglionaric fibers originating in either the brain stem, here cranial nerves, or sacral, spinal cord, are part of the parasympathetic division. So we distinguish two sections of parasympathetic divisions. This is the cranial section and sacral section. Together we call it craniosacral division. This is another name of parasympathetic nervous systems. And preganglionaric fibers synapse on neurons of terminal ganglia. You see here small neurons, small nervous cells located close to the target organs. They are close to the stomach, close to the lungs, close to the heart, and this is a feature, one of the feature, most typical feature of parasympathetic division, that the second effector's neurons located close to organ. And as you guess, these parasympathetic divisions is called rest and digest system because it conserves energy and promotes sedentary activities such as digestion. And here another picture showing structure of parasympathetic division. Of course, notice that one of the difficulties in studying autonomic nervous system is that we have to use schemas. Only a few large structures can be shown on anatomical specimens during preparation. So we have to use schemas or diagrams. And this is one of the diagrams where visible two parts of parasympathetic divisions, cranial part and sacral part, and also visible the preganglionaric fibers. They are myelinated. They have myelinated fibers, and they look as white fibers. But after intramural ganglion, this small composition of small group of neurons located in the internal organ we call intramural ganglia, and neurons have short unmyelinated, no myelinated axons which reach the organ and innervate smooth muscles and glands, etc. Here the name of centers in central nervous system, so central nervous system centers of the parasympathetic nervous system. You hear that cranial center has got 4 nucleus. This is the nucleus of 4 cranial nerves. The 3rd pair, 7th pair, it is not right. This is not 11, it is 9 cranial pair called glossopharyngeal nerve. I hope you remember it. And the dorsal nucleus of the vagus nerve. And in sacral region, sacral center, we find only small parasympathetic nuclei located in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th sacral segments here, in the end of spinal cord, in the caudal part of spinal cord. And peripheral ganglion parasympathetic nervous systems in our head, located a little bit separated from organs, and you see different ganglia that is parasympathetic ganglion. First, I show you ganglion pterygopalatinum, located in pterygopalatine fossa. Then you see the ganglion oticum close to the glandula parotis and innervated this salivatory gland. Also, ganglion submandibulare close to the submandibular and sublingual salivatory glands, and this ganglion is responsible for stimulated these glands to secrete salivatory fluid. And also one small ganglion located in orbit, we call it ganglion ciliare. It is responsible for innervation the musculus sphincter pupil and musculus ciliare, located in the eyes, in eyeball. Notice that the lacrimal gland innervated from pterygopalatine ganglion, but not from the ciliar ganglion. Another picture illustrates the ciliary ganglion here. This is a small ganglion inside of orbit, and as you see, it gets the preganglionaric fibers from the oculomotor nerve, this third pair of cranial nerve. Actually, you see that these muscles, musculus sphincter pupil, is innervated with by the ciliar ganglion, but in other muscles, which is the musculus dilatator pupilla, is innervated from the cervical ganglion, which is a ganglion of sympathetic nervous systems. Notice that musculus sphincter pupilla contracts pupil, but musculus dilatator pupilla extract dilates pupil, and the first function is the part of parasympathetic division, but the second function is dilation, is the result of activation sympathetic division of autonomic nervous systems. Here the submandibular and pterygopalatine ganglion, which are also peripheral ganglion of parasympathetic nervous systems. Both ganglion are connected with the nerve, facial nerve, the seventh pair of cranial nerves. And here you see the otic ganglion, which is close to the salivary parotid glands, and this ganglion gets the preganglionaric fibers from glossopharyngeal nerve, the ninth pair of cranial nerves. And then postganglionaric postganglionic fibers reach the organs and stimulate it to produce salivary secret. Here, parasympathetic innervation of pelvis organ, and you see second, third, or fourth sacral segment, where in the lateral corner, lateral horn located the first neuron, and then parasympathetic neuron, and the second is in the organ walls, such organs as a urinary bladder, rectum, and uterus. All of those pelvis organs have intramural parasympathetic neurons getting preganglionic fiber from sacral segment, from here. Next is a sympathetic division of autonomic nervous system, and as you see, this is another reaction of the organism, which is called fight or flight. Fight or flight reaction is more typical. It is ancient reaction which helped animals survived. And sympathetic division is also called the thoracolumbar division of nervous system, because it arises from the thoracic and lumbar regions of the spinal cord. These divisions called with the American physiologist, famous American physiologist Willie Cannon, fight or flight systems, because an increase in sympathetic activity generally stimulates tissue metabolism, increase alertness, and prepare the body to deal with emergencies. Prepare body for the fight, or sometimes it is reasonable to escape fight just to flight or run. Structure of sympathetic divisions is here. There are also two parts of sympathetic nervous systems, as the same in the parasympathetic, and this is the central part. Usually this is the spinal cord nuclei, and peripheral part. They are located in paravertebral, prevertebral, and perivascular plexus. You see here this central part. This is nuclei intermedio sacralis, located in the lateral horns of spinal cord. But peripheral, this is long chain of the paravertebral ganglion. Here we call sympathetic trunk. This is the first composition of peripheral part. Then this is a prevertebral ganglion, also located just anteriorly to the vertebral column. And sympathetic, all of these show the sympathetic organs and perivascular plexus, because these postganglionar fibers come to organs with the arterial blood vessels, or with the arteries. They use arteries just as a way to come to the organs, and innervated arteries and blood vessels as well. Here you see the black structure is paravertebral ganglion. This is a sympathetic trunk, but small group of sometimes very small group of ganglia located on the large arteries called prevertebral ganglion. And after this ganglion we see the different small and large sympathetic perivascular plexuses reaching the effectors, reaching the organs. Here you see how the sympathetic postganglionary nerve fibers come to the organs, and innervated smooth muscles with small varicocytes on the surface of the cells. This is a small synapses which have norepinephrine or noradrenaline in the synapse gaps. Here you see the reaction. This is very ancient reaction of animals and human as well, fight or flight reaction, and this is only sympathetic activation of the autonomic nervous systems. You see that it's reasonable sometimes to flight. And the problem of this reaction is stress. Stress, which get from English name stress, means state of increases stress, is complex or set non-specific adaptive reaction to the impact of adverse factors. And sometimes this factor may be physical factors or psychological factors. I hope modern people, every modern man or woman knows what stress means, because this is make us unhappy and violates our homeostasis. The Gansillier in 1936 proposed three stages of stress. First stage is anxiety, when this is a preparation stage, when a lot of hormones as adrenaline and noradrenaline come in our blood, and the body prepares for defense or for the flight, for the run. Second stage is resistance. When we fight, we become aggressive, and we can do everything. We stimulate. We, as a fighter, we walk actively and fight actively. But then, when stress is longer than, don't know, 1 hour, half of hour, we get exhaustion stage, when our activity come to the zero, and this is when the disease may be. The stress has positive and negative effect. positive effect is that it helps to survive, and our brain works better during stress. The oxytocin and the hormone hormones what is responsible for oxytocin contributes the elimination of conflict situation, and it contributes to the establishment of trusting contact. Then another function, for example, immune system is activated during the stress. So stress is not bad, but long stress is bad. So you see negative effects of the stress, and sometimes these effects occur with chronic stress. And as you nicely see, there are more negative effects of stress than positive ones. So the main idea is to avoid stress and fight with the stress. Just I'm sorry. Сейчас лекцию дочитаю, перезвоню, ладно? So I do recommend you to avoid stress and fight with the stress with some activities like emotional outburst, like good breathing. Yoga help to breathe and avoid stress. Physical exercise is very important to avoid stress, because the stress is preparing organism, prepare body for fight. So we need to do something, to do some activity with our muscles, to start muscle work, and that's why people who get physical activity every day, they survive less with stress. Support of loved people, and physiotherapy and art. If you get stress, you just go to the cinema or theater, everywhere, just walking outdoors, and it helps to deactivate stress. Emotional outbursts. This is the when people try to express emotion. As I know, in Japan, they have special figure, special monument in big companies. They have anti-stress room where the monument of boss, big boss, is located. This is like a toll, and with so you can come and knock this monument or this object, just to express negative emotion. I think it is necessary. Here I'd like to show you sympathetic trunk as a main part of sympathetic systems. It has 5 divisions: cervical, only 3 ganglia, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and sometimes coccygeal, rudimentary ganglia. And here you see cervical ganglion, and this is the thoracic ganglion of sympathetic trunk. Those ganglia are visible, and we can see that in cadaver, in specimens. Here also sympathetic trunk, thoracic part, and you see the nerves come to the preganglionar, another department, and different plexus. Here the sacral plexus of the sympathetic trunk, and a lot of sympathetic plexus with the different name. We could find those sympathetic plexus usually on the surface of large arteries, because these postganglionary fibers use arteries as a way to reach organs. And here diaphragmatic ganglion, abdominal sympathetic ganglion, and even the plexus, we call them hypogastric, superior and inferior hypogastric plexuses located in the pelvis. Here sympathetic plexus of female pelvis. And another, the small part of autonomic nervous system, this is only modern knowledge. This is the third part of autonomic nervous system. We call it difference. In Western universities, they call it enteric nervous systems, enteric sympathetic system. But here in Russia, we call this sympathetic system metasympathetic nervous systems. This is a small connection between neurons in the intestinum tenui, and these microscopic nodes, ganglion, produce motor skills for esophagus, stomachs, intestines, bladder, and they provide peristaltic motor activation of this internal organ. This is all for now, and I'd like to thank you for your attention, and as usual, I am open for your questions, because this lecture is the last lecture before anatomical exam you get in the end of February or maybe in the beginning of March. I'd like to wish good luck on exam and explain you how we will pass, how we will have procedure, what is the procedure of examination of in human anatomy. First of all, you will have practical questions, and you will have to show about 10 anatomical structure. Every students will get the practical card examination, and with the 10 questions you have to show anatomical structure, and then to call this structure in Latin. 10 anatomical structure, and it will be the first degree, the first evaluation of your knowledge in practical way of thinking. Then second, you come to the exam and examination room and get theoretical questions. It will be the examination card from three questions. First one and second one is a typical question about nervous systems, internal organ. You have to tell professors more about what you know about anatomical feature of this organ. And the third point of the exam ticket is the task, which use some of the clinical situation with anatomical questions. This is the connection between anatomy and clinical disciplines, and usually it is not difficult to answer if you know anatomy. All of questions, practical questions, theoretical questions, and examination tasks are located in Moodle in special division. I prepare these documents, and you can start preparation for exams right now. I strongly recommend, I do recommend you to start preparation for exams right now. Don't put it with don't put it in the last day, because the material is huge and you have to be prepared well. This I'd like to explain you about examination procedure you will have very soon. If you have question, please don't hesitate to put your question in textbook. If there are no questions, then let me say you thank you. Let me thank you again. It was nice to spend time with you, my fellow students, and I hope to see all of you in exam, and I hope you will be lucky in passing exam. Thank you very much. It was all for now.